French unions lashed out over plans to raise the country's retirement age from 60 to 62 by staging a one-day general strike that disrupted trains and planes, hospitals, and mail delivery. At the same time, London Underground workers reacted to plans of job cuts in their country by closing much of the city's subway system for 24 hours, leaving millions of commuters struggling to get to work. And here's the irony. The strikes came as European Union finance ministers were meeting in Strasbourg amid their own worries that the government debt crisis that alarmed markets worldwide earlier this year could flare up again. In France, post offices, schools, and hospitals struggled with an 18% staff cut. The strike also blocked the Atlantic coast port of Saint-Nazaire. Airlines were forced to cancel a quarter of their flights, and only 2 out of every 5 high-speed trains ran during the strike. An estimated 450,000 protesters took to the streets in Marseille, Lyon, Paris, and other cities throughout France. In London, passengers were forced to use bikes, buses, and boats in an attempt to beat the stoppage, while the Rail, Maritime, and Transport Union continued to protest the government's plans to cut 800 jobs. The London Chamber of Commerce estimates the strike will cost the country's fragile economy £48 million. But the strikes in France and Britain are just a prelude to more discontent elsewhere in Europe. Spanish workers will strike on September 29th over labor market reforms, while those in the Czech Republic will protest on September 21st against a 10% salary cut for state employees. Sonya Artero, TVB News.
Sonya Artero reports.
The strikes in the Spanish city of Barcelona turned ugly by noon when rioters began brawling with police who resorted to using force to disperse protesters. Police fired tear gas and clashed with the youth who broke windows, looted stores, and set a police car on fire. In Greece, hundreds of protesters in solidarity with workers across Europe demonstrated against their government's economic reform measures. Public transport in the Greek capital came to a halt as workers walked off the job. Hundreds of thousands took to the streets in Brussels and Belgium. Police began swinging their batons during one heated protest where angry strikers tried pushing through a police barrier. Portuguese strikers reported a success when tens of thousands of protesters supported their peaceful marches. The absence of thousands of workers in Slovenia caused a major traffic jam of vehicles stranded in customs queues. And in Italy, people took to the streets of Rome, Naples, and Venice, where they chanted that pension-cutting measures are killing the poor. Sonya Artero, TVB News. Critics were quick to denounce these spending cuts. They included both the opposition Labour Party and ordinary people who are being affected.
There is an alternative, there is a different way, but I fear what the government is going to do is take an irresponsible gamble with our nation's economy.
I've just been told that I lost my job on Monday. So quite a few of us have lost our jobs. You know, the government says we're all in this together, but it's us poor people that are paying for it.
Large banking firms, the people who caused this recession, are the ones who are doing fine, and we're going to be the ones who are made to suffer in the recession.
More than 1,000 people rallied in London to speak out against the austerity plan. As for the military cutbacks, Britain's ally, the United States, says London will not be sidelined in its role in maintaining global security. Workers striking against pension reform in France took no prisoners during Wednesday's protests, effectively shutting down much of the country's commerce. While the government struggled to restore its fuel supply, riot police were overcome by angry strikers who cut off access to one major airport. With a Senate vote on the pension reform now expected on Friday at the earliest, French unions put on even more pressure with a 10th straight day of refinery strikes and work stoppages at regional airports. Fuel imports have hit record highs as the government tries to get around the blockade to France's largest oil port in Marseille. Meantime, 51 oil tankers had to wait off the coast amid shortages caused by refinery strikes and fuel depot protests. At the Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, hundreds of strikers cut off access to the airport beginning at dawn with a roadblock. Angry protesters took over one human police barrier, literally pushing over officers to expand their striking efforts. Passengers trying to make flights resorted to dragging their suitcases hundreds of meters on foot.
We had to walk with the luggage, and it took about 30 minutes to get here. The street was locked, and it was truly hard to get here.
Over in Lyon, youths continued clashing with police. They also kicked in storefronts, smashed up car windows, set trash bins on fire, and threw bottles on the streets. The presence of riot police did nothing to deter the striking mob. Officers used tear gas against the youth, but appeared unable to stop the violence. With nearly a third of France's gas stations dry, authorities stepped in overnight to force open 3 fuel stations that had been blocked off for days by striking workers. But President Nicolas Sarkozy remains determined to pass the reform bill immediately, adamant to begin curbing his country's deficit and reducing debt.